Folks, we're going to delay starting tonight's meeting for just a few more minutes. We got one of our commissioners that's on his way. If he didn't, we wouldn't have a quorum. So anyway, we're going to give him another few minutes to get here. Sorry for the delay. I'm going to go ahead and call the May Planning Commission meeting to order. We'll start the way we start most of them with a housekeeping item of viewing and approving the minutes from April's meeting. Does everybody have a chance to look those over? And
I'll move to be approved. Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the April meeting. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right, a second agenda item here is request to approve the recommendation for approval of an ordinance. I tell you what, this is the airport, the current airport zoning to correlate to the changes of the Russellville Municipal Airport since the original airport zoning in 1987 repealed. Anyway, if you got a staff report on that, Kevin?
Yes, sir. No formalized report.
Okay.
Suggested that it's from the city attorney.
Okay.
I'll let him kind of opine on that.
All right.
I think one of the things you hit on the head was 1987. There's a few things that need to be modernized. Briefly, the airport commission is no longer in the form that it was back when this was formed. It dissolved. It's no longer a body that can hold property such as the airport. It's an advisory board, and the airport has been extended since that time. So there's other things like that that needs to be modernized, and I talked with Mr. Frazier today, and we should have it wrapped up in final form by next month.
Okay. All right. Having that being said, I will entertain a motion to table this till next month when he said that will be complete.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second to table this item until our June meeting. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Item number 3, request to review and recommendation for approval to amend the Russellville Zoning Code 1966 in regard to needs for clarification in certain provisions for administrative purposes in Articles 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 13. Table permitted uses. Trey, you want to elaborate on, or Kevin, do you have a staff report on that?
The only staff recommended change, and I had sent this over to Trey, is that if you want to move through your packet for this particular item, it's page 10 of 12, particularly section 942, public hearing and notice. 9421 reads, public notice shall be published at least once and for not less than 7 days scheduled hearing date. I suggested that we insert the words prior to scheduled hearing date, and that was just grammatics. So that is what I felt like the intent was, and Trey can qualify that. Other than that, there are items in here from a planning standpoint that I think are a good thing. I will call out section 8.5 zoning code and zoning map amendments on page 5 of 12. In particular, section 8.5 in general, you're talking about linking a zoning code change to both text and map. They are symbiotic relationship. Text and map are both regulatory tools in the code. So linking them to each other in terms of the zoning code changes, I think, an appropriate move for a zoning code. And that's all I have.
Okay. Trey, do you have anything to add to that?
Briefly, I just clearing up the appeal process for the Board of Adjustment, and that is laid out. There's really only difference that I've had to change is that to make it clear as to appeals can be appealed to the administrative official by more than just the applicant. It could be by a third party, and even that third party can appeal from the Zoning Board of Adjustment to Circuit Court. That's one of the changes. And then really, as Kevin alluded to, Article 8 needs to be cleaned up just because it appears as though, I think through the transcription of the old code to the current code, I think parts were left in, and there's duplicate processes in different sections of Title 8, and that's really necessitated this change. And this clears it up once and for all. Plus, with Kevin's changes, it's with the zoning text amendment and also the zoning map. It cleans it up, I think, makes it so that there's no ambiguity in zoning changes to the map.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for anyone? What's your pleasure?
I'll move to be approved.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. On item number 3 here, all those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Okay, item number 4, public hearing to review and amend the zoning code in regard to Article 320, commercial building design. Now, this is a public hearing. If anybody from the public wants to chime in, we would be more than happy to hear your comments on this. Kevin, you got a report on this?
No formalized report, however, I do have a little narrative that I can provide you all to qualify some of the red lines that you see in your draft revisions to the code. As you can see, this particular section of the regulations deals with commercial building design in the C2 zone, and as we've seen in the past, it omits metal. That's the short version of it. Your list of materials that's allowed in terms of a standard commercial building design in the city of Russellville does not include metal. Now, you are allowed to use metal on trim of roofs, windows, and doors, but that's it. You can't clad a primary facade, for instance, with metal. And there may have been some good intentions as far as not allowing that material in the city of Russellville in that zone. Could very well have been. Recently, we've seen, not recently, actually, in the last couple of years, metal in particular has seen a lot of architectural changes. Metal isn't what it once was. You can't always assume that every metal building is going to be your standard pre-manufactured corrugated metal building. Not that corrugated in terms of pattern is always bad either, but there's lots of qualifiers, lots of differentiation. So what you have basically is revising the section of the regulations, and you can read it, but it says acceptable building materials for the affected portions of the buildings as defined in this section shall, and then there's red line language, include items A through H. And what that is essentially reordering the letters in the list, and item D is architectural metals. I'll point to item C first, even though architectural or split concrete block is currently available. It's to the exclusion of the following types. There was no differentiation. Right now, there's concrete blocks in there, but the language that we're adding is precision concrete blocks, or CMU. For the record, CMU as an acronym is not in your red line, but we would recommend that that be added in after blocks in parentheses. CMU is a concrete masonry unit. It is one of those types of concrete blocks that is, it appears as though it's a lesser quality. It looks like it's more of a pre-manufactured. It's not something you would want to include in your architectural or split concrete block material, okay? That's why there's a differentiator. And there's also the exclusion of smooth face concrete blocks. Again, this is all draft language. This is for you all to digest. And then into D is where you start to begin to talk about metals. Architectural metals, in quotes, to the exclusion of all pre-engineered metal buildings. For the purposes of this section, architectural metals shall be comprised of the following materials. And then you can see sub-items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in your red line. Those are also summarized for you in a second document that I sent out to the commission today. It's a picture, it's a pattern book, if you will, that gives you a pictorial example of each type of these metals. You can see these things in a variety of different forms when they come in for permit with Mr. Holstein's review process. But what it does is it allows flexibility for metal. Now, the one thing that it does, that our regulations do not do right now, after D for architectural metals, if you go down through your letters, H, fiber cement siding is not included either. Hardy plank If you've ever seen James Hardie products, they're actually very durable. They're a cement masonry board. They're actually more durable a lot of times than fiberglass siding. They function very well, and they have a texture to them that looks like wood. So we added in H fiber cement siding for that purpose. But what I was going to mention to you is that these regulations don't address a couple of things, and this is more for discussion. Right now, we have existing buildings that have been constructed in the city of Russellville that we need to make compliant with the regulations. That's the impetus for doing this now, is that we have metal buildings that, for whatever reason, they've been constructed, but they actually don't look aesthetically bad at all. But the regulations that you have before you do not go to the extent of what other cities have done with respect to metal or other materials that they feel they want to regulate further. I'll just mention a few of the qualifiers here, and you all can talk about this amongst yourselves. Is it something that this city wants to do further, independent of this? That's up for further discussion. One of the things that these regulations do not account for is what you call blank facades, okay? If we add this verbiage in here, there's nothing to say that you can't have an entirely blank facade of an otherwise qualified metal, but absolutely blank facade, no doors, no windows, no pattern change, no break. These are architectural concepts, but they tend to deploy themselves in those sort of aesthetic overlay districts that you might see in these historic downtowns or other places that is seeing a lot of redevelopment. Is that something that this city wants to do? Sometimes what you'll see is cities will put a threshold, right? Like a facade has to be at least 30% of a particular material. That is not before you right now. Other things that other regulations dictate are mandatory material pattern changes, breaks, language such as preferred versus encouraged. Do you want to use preferred or encouraged, or do you want to make this mandatory? Again, that language is not in here right now. The other thing that it doesn't do is regulate whether you care if the metal has a standing seam, a ribbed versus corrugated, or a flat panel. All the metals that I have described before you cover all of that. That's all allowed right now. But if there's a type of metal that's in your list that isn't aesthetically appealing to the city, I'm not sure what that is. So this gets into a qualifying discussion. But right now, what this red line change does do is it allows the city to make compliant metal structures that have either been constructed now or that are waiting to submit permits but can't because they want to use metals. And a lot of the metals that you are seeing out there are actually very, very high quality. They're very durable, and they are aesthetically appealing. It's just our regs aren't sophisticated enough to handle them right now. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody from the public want to step up and have any comments or any questions about this? Any commissioners? You have a comment, question?
I have one question on that. I know that we're talking about the metals right now, but is there any provision that we could put in the code that would allow for some new product that we don't know about right now to be considered, so we don't get into
Sure.
situation, and maybe, and I don't know what that is, but maybe incorporate some language that would allow some new product to be utilized if it met certain parameters, and as far as the city, so we don't have to come back to trying to add something after that, but to
Well,
maybe help the developer a little bit more.
The answer is yes. You can add whatever language you feel is necessary to accommodate a different material that's coming out next week. We can't predict all of the different types of materials that could come out. Again, not saying that this is something that the city wants to engage in at this point, but there are other places in the country that choose to use what they call a design review panel. Independent, it's administrative in a lot of ways, where it might be 3 or 2 architects that can simply weigh in on whether a material is, quote, acceptable or not, and not have a high level of specificity in the regs, but empower another board. You can either do it that way, or you have to get to the point where you're mechanizing your code so tightly that you're accounting for all of the possible options that comes before the administrative staff. Which way does the city want to go?
I just think, I mean, it's just my opinion on it, but not so rigid that these are the only materials that we're gonna use, but also flexible enough that if there is something and it's brought before architects or the city or whatever, and it is a product that we think would be, that would fit into what our I guess the spirit of our code is, that we can expedite that if there is a new product and it meets all those parameters. Not, I don't want to bog anything down, but something that we don't have to go back in and change the code to allow something that is not on, that's not allowed right now.
Well, this is just the C2 zone, first of all. And the second thing is, there is a note, and I did make sure that I put this in there. It says, this list below should not be considered exhaustive. Trying to find the out. And other materials may be considered for review upon request of the applicant on a case-by-case basis. It's just a way to have some guidance, but then,
Are you looking for something that can be done in-house rather than, but you don't before a review board? Is that what you're asking? Could the building official per se, approve a material that he felt justified that material was an architectural style rather than just a standing seam warehouse?
I think as long as we, and I think you've done that with this, but if, I'm more about if there's some other product that comes out that we don't have to go back and amend, add, we can add it later on, but at least the process for the developer, if there is a product that they want to use, that there is an avenue for them to get that approved so they can continue, they don't have to go back, and that's all I'm kind of looking for.
What I would think maybe we could look at is if it were done, if it were brought in-house for building official approval, and an architect was the person who had submitted it and qualified it, then if in fact I still felt that there was an issue there, I could take it to them.
I think that'd be great.
and I think that's appropriate because the building official has to determine the safety factor of the materials being used. You know, is it gonna be fire rated? It gets into all the fire prevention code issues.
Sounds like there's language there that would allow that to happen and still be within code.
Yes, sir.
I like the fact of it being taken care of in-house rather than putting it up to an architectural board, which is gonna be submitted anyway, so, I mean, that would make more sense too, so, and I think that would,
I think we see whether it's qualified or not, and if there's any discrepancy, I'll really see it.
right. Okay. Is there any other comments, any questions at all? Luke, you wanna make that a motion?
I will make a motion to approve as presented.
All right, we have a motion, there is a second.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to amend the zoning code. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Okay. Item number 5, public hearing requesting review and recommendation for approval of rezone Briars subdivision Phase 2, lots 22 through 55, from R2 to R3. Subject property is located at Ashley Drive between South Asher Avenue and Ashbrook Lane, submitted by Dave Garza, Barrett Associates, on behalf of Wig Creek Properties LLC. Kevin, you got a staff report on that one?
I'll just summarize the cover sheet you all have in front of you. What is triggering the need for a zoning change is simply the lot sizes that they're submitting right now under an R2 for a duplex structure. The minimum lot size you would need is 9,000 square feet, and the applicant is submitting lot sizes that are close to 7,500 square feet, which is allowable for duplex structures, but only if the zoning were R3. That's what's triggering it. All the other things that you would find in your bulk and area standard zoning density, I did make a point that the R3 zoning, if it were enacted, has a density cap of 24 density units per acre. Well, the built density of what the applicant is proposing is actually close to 4.4. So it's much less than what the R3 zoning cap would even allow. But this is a function of lot size. That's all I have.
Okay. Dave, you have anything to add to that?
Just want to remind some of those who are all on the planning commission that were here back in 2017 and 16 when we started the project.
I think that's just me.
Pardon me? Just you? Okay. Then you can remind the others that we came first with kind of a sketch plat with the idea of what we would like to do for this section, and it met with favorability. And so then we started with the first phase, and that first phase we started with the rezoning and with the preliminary plat, and it is now almost complete. Looks really good. And now we're wanting the second phase to continue that. So it's not something that's just new. This is the second part of what we started many years ago. And as far as the notifications, I only received one phone call from an individual, and they just asked, "Is it going to look nice like the other one?" And I said, "Yes, it's just a continuation." She goes, "Well, that's great. Then I don't have a problem with it." So. And I think they live in one of the houses behind.
They are, that is a very attractive part of
It does look
town
good.
right there. So, anything Scott Sanders puts his hand to, it seems to be that way though, it seems like. But, anybody else have any comment or any question?
Well, if this was approved back several years ago, why aren't we discussing it now?
It was approved as a sketch plat, as concept, that we wanted to know how the city felt about it, how the planning commission felt about it, and then how the public felt about it. So when we did the first phase, it was only half of that, and it gave us a chance, it gave the public and those in that area to see what was going to go on, to comment, and we didn't receive any resistance, I don't think at that time at all. So it looked like everybody was in favor of it, so we went forward. So we went forward with that first part because financially that's what we were going to as far as we could go, that was the cap. And so we're doing that, and it's worked out great. Everything looks real good, so now we're able to do the next part. So, you have a limit financially what you can do.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anybody else have any questions, any comments? Do I hear a motion?
I move be approved.
Yeah, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to rezone the property from R2 to R3. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay, item number 6, we're going to request a review and approve the preliminary plat for the Briar Subdivision Phase 2, located on Ashley Drive, submitted by Dave Garza. Kevin, you have a staff report on that one?
Again, the cover sheet that you have before you, I'll just summarize it. What you have is a listing of TRC, Technical Review Committee comments that were submitted by the city's engineer. This is being submitted concurrently with the zoning request, which is requiring some platting, some preliminary platting. At the plat level, you have items 1 through 3 that have been addressed to date. That's based on the city engineer's review. That is distinguished a little bit from the ones that are to be addressed at final. So we wanted to make sure that the planning commission was aware of those other items that are still pending, but they have to have those satisfied before they go to final plat. And then, of course, pre-construction conference will be required prior to land disturbance. Again, that's at the staff level before they go to permit and land
You
disturbance.
did mention city engineer. Would you like to take this time to go ahead and introduce our new city engineer?
I would let him introduce himself.
Okay.
Glenn?
Good afternoon. I'm Glenn Newman, the city engineer for Russellville. I've been here about a month and a half, so this is probably the first formal technical plat process I've been through with the planning commission. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Dave, you have anything to add to that, or?
No, if you have any questions, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. Pretty open and shut. All right. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. All right, item number 7, request to approve vacating an existing alley in the west area of Block 56 of JL Shin Edition in the city of Russellville, located on South Frankfurt Avenue and East 4th, submitted by Robert Culpepper family. All right, Kevin, you got a staff report on that one?
If you'll notice in your staff report, this is a quite brief staff report. It wasn't met with much fanfare from a planning review standpoint. The applicant's cover letter essentially states that, there's going to be a proposed building, but the proposed building would essentially start to encroach on this former alley right-of-way that's platted technically. But if that were vacated, it stems off and is cut off by the railroad anyway. So it's not as though this would function in any way in terms of the future master streets plan or anything from a planning standpoint. So essentially your report here is saying that the closure is not in conflicts with the city master street plan and that we recommend approval. That's it.
Is there anybody from the Culpepper would like to, Dave? Okay, go ahead.
They live out of town, so they've hired us to take this. Right now, as it is, it's like the planner said, it splits the property. They own half of the lots north, and then all of the lots to the south of the alley, and it splits it in two. They've been approached many times by certain individuals to purchase property, but for the longest time, they just didn't have, they just didn't feel like selling it. But now they're at that point, and the business of the person that's looking at it now does quite a bit of business for Polk County, and it's going to be an office business, and they're looking at to purchase it for that new building that they can move all of their employees there. And so there's nothing there now. I think it's going to be a great benefit, to the area. And with it being an office building, you're not going to see a whole lot of traffic. Most of what they do is out in the county area. They go out and look at properties and stuff, and then do the reports. So they don't have very many people that come there.
Dave, are there any existing utilities or easements that's going to be an issue?
No, there are none. And the railroad cuts it off.
Okay.
Haven't had anybody from the public or any neighbors that have any
No.
objection to this?
None. Well, I mean, they're the only, they own the property on both sides, so they would be the only ones that would
Yeah,
come
that's
forward.
right. There
There's
wouldn't
no
be
one to
anybody keeping
notify.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to go ahead and close that alleyway.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second yet to approve the request to vacate the existing alley. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Item number 8. We're gonna bring that up now. Okay. All right. I request to nominate 2 at-large members by the Planning Commission to serve on the Board of Adjustments to fill the vacancy of Lannis Nicholson and Justin Cochran. The nominations will need confirmation by the City Council. Do we have anybody? Would anybody like to nominate anybody for the at-large positions? Anybody here want to serve on the Planning Commission, or on the Board of Adjustments?
Has to be an at-large.
At-large. Anybody know of anybody? Okay. Nobody, since there's no one, yeah.
We don't have any
we'll have to,
recommendations?
Yeah, there's no, since no names no names are coming up, then we're gonna go ahead and just, table that one for
I'll
go ahead.
nominate Scott Sanders.
Scott Sanders. Okay. If I wasn't the chairman, I'd second that one, but anybody else?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to, nominate Scott Sanders
Yeah, that'd be good.
for the vacancy on the Board of Adjustments. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, we're looking for those.
Yeah.
I'm,
Since I nominated him, and I'm here anyway, I was at the planning commission, but not so much on the board of adjustments.
let's pray about that one first. What do you say, Dave? Okay, all right? All right, okay. If there's no other business, we are adjourned. Let's get out of here real quick. Yeah.
We're, setting